Welcome to the Art of Badassery Podcast. I'm Jenn, your Chief Badassery Officer, and boy, oh boy, do I have such an exciting guest for you today. Many of you out there probably already know who she is. She is the fierce, she is the fabulous Lisa Bilyeu. I'm going to read just a little bit of her bio because I really want Lisa to tell us her story. In case you've been sleeping, Lisa is an entrepreneur, producer, best-selling author, and public speaker. She co-founded the billion-dollar brand Quest Nutrition and is co-founder and president of Impact Theory Studios. You may have seen that around. Lisa has her own show called Women of Impact, which she so kindly had me on as a guest, which showcases females who have overcome incredible hardship to achieve massive success, which is my personal definition of badassery. And last year, Lisa released her #1 best-selling book, Radical Confidence, which details a no-nonsense approach to becoming the hero of your own life. If you've ever suffered from that, if you've ever lacked confidence in any area of your life, listen up to this episode, lean in, because literally she is giving you the keys to the kingdom right here. It includes an unfiltered look at her own transformation from insecure housewife to powerhouse entrepreneur. I love that last line so much. Welcome, Lisa. How are you today?
Thank you, Jenn. Chief Badassery Officer. Girl, that is the best freaking title I have ever heard.
And it sounds better when you say badassery. So, yeah.
Only because you're American.
Yeah,
Brits out there wouldn't think so.
Badassery. Lisa, I'm fascinated by your story for so many reasons. Obviously, as an entrepreneur myself with huge goals, watching you and your husband just catapult into success has been so encouraging. And especially that you went from this nutrition bar to self-development, personal growth gurus. I want to know, can you take us back to the beginning, those beginning days of feeling like an insecure housewife and how you got started?
I started out thinking I was just going to support my husband for a year. I had big dreams, big goals, and so it was just going to be temporary. And we had realized we both loved filmmaking. We both had experiences on movie sets, which we actually hated. And so we just decided whoever controls the art controls the resources. So, hey, it should be easy. Let's go out, make enough money that we can make our own movies. Sounds pretty easy, right? And this is like in early years, it's about 20 years ago. So the word entrepreneurship wasn't there. But that's really what he had started to do. And I was like, okay, as the female, as the wife, like brought up Greek Orthodox, I was always told and taught, you're going to be a great housewife, you're going to be a great mother. So I kind of expected that as my life trajectory anyway. But in the moment, I was like, I'm just going to do this for a year. So I really want your audience right now to even think about what's that thing that they said they're just going to do it temporary for the sake of other things, for the sake of the greater good, right? Of a collective goal. Now, what ended up happening is our belief systems, this is obviously all in hindsight, but our belief systems end up dictating how we show up every day. And so after about the year mark, where I was cooking and I was cleaning for him so he wouldn't have to make those decisions. That was actually the goal, is that, if you don't have to spend time on making decisions on the smaller things, can you focus on making the bigger decisions? So my husband was his goal. He was going to go make the bigger decisions. I was going to make the smaller decisions. And as a team, we were marching towards a collective goal. But after the first 12 months, we realized we weren't there yet. And so I said, I can do this for another 12 months. Now, of course, what ends up happening with goals is that it never ends up being where you expect it to be. Right. And you get comfortable. And that's what happened to me. I got comfortable in what I call purgatory of the mundane. My life was just mundane enough that I got stuck there. I never hit rock bottom. It didn't jolt me awake, right? A lot of people who've done amazing things that they hit rock bottom. Right. And that's what got them to change their lives. But I didn't. And so I do think that becomes the worst handcuffs of all, because you don't actually realize the life you could have if you pushed yourself enough. So every day I was just taking enough steps forward, and I was getting my validation over the years of being an amazing wife, even though that wasn't what I wanted. And that also is what kept me in that space for 8 years. And it wasn't until my husband would come home and he was just miserable. It ended up, we were just chasing money. The goal of the movies had no longer really felt like that was really true to us. And so we end up in this pattern of consistently doing the 9 to 5 job just to pay ends meet. And eventually I just pulled the ripcord and I said to my husband, I don't care about money. I just want to see you happy again. And I want to see us again. Like, it's now damaging our relationship. And that was the first pivot. But that moment taught me that I had to speak up.
Right.
That no one is a mind reader. My husband didn't know that I was miserable. I didn't even realize I was miserable. And I think that that's like the greatest trick the devil ever pulled, right? Is kind of making you believe that, you know, what you think is true. And so I thought I would end up being a housewife. I thought, well, this is what I should do. And so I never rattled the cage. I never asked myself, what do you actually want in life? And so that was the first pivot moment that actually then began the start to what now is Quest Nutrition.
Amazing. And I just watched your TEDx talk where you kind of dive into your background quite a bit and show like where your father in Greece grew up and the donkeys he rode.
Yeah.
It was really, really rural, and the culture you were brought up into, you just adapted.
Yeah, and that adoption also makes you feel like you're ungrateful when you have achieved something. So for instance, every year that I was like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. I never wanted to be a housewife, right? Like that whisper in your head. Every time that whisper would creep in, the other voice in my head would be like, well, Lisa, how ungrateful are you? You have a husband that loves you. You have a roof over your head. And so this is where the gratitude piece comes in, right? On social media, a lot of people say, you know, lean into gratitude. And while I absolutely think it can be very valuable, it really can. Like in those moments where you maybe don't feel good about yourself, you can say, oh, but I'm very grateful to have a husband that loves me, a roof over my head. The problem is you've got to be very aware where that gratitude turns into toxic gratitude. And for me, it happens slowly. But eventually that voice in my head, instead of saying like, oh, but Lisa, you're so grateful. Now it was like, are you not grateful to have a husband that loves you? Right. And that piece is then what kept me there. Because I was like, well, how can I complain about the fact that I don't want to be a stay-at-home wife when I have a husband that loves me? Other people would die to have a husband that loves, you know, you as much as he loves me. Other people would die to have a security where they didn't have to work. And so that voice that was helping me ended up actually being the thing that kept me there for too long.
That's so interesting because we talk about toxic positivity a lot, but we never really realize that sometimes we could do that to our own selves as well.
Yeah, we really did.
That's so interesting. Okay. So back to those early days, you said that was the first pivot. What was next? And, you know, as you started growing this new company, because that was still while Tom was doing film. Yeah.
So he was actually, the idea was, let's go make enough money to then finance our own movies. And at the time he met these two guys and they were entrepreneurs, they were bodybuilders. And so he's like, oh, I can learn from them. I want 6-pack abs. They've got 6-pack abs and I want to be wealthy. They're wealthy. So let me just tag along and figure out and learn all along the way. So that was the 8 years where they then started to build it was a tech company they started together. Even though my husband hated tech, it was like, this is the path to success. And so that's why he became more and more miserable. Once I told him, I cannot do this anymore. I am not interested in money. I do not care. I just want my husband back. He went in to technically quit. Now, when he went to quit, they admitted they were miserable as well. Wow. And so the idea in that moment was, what's the thing we can do every day and love, even if we were failing? And for very different reasons, a protein bar was the answer.
Yeah.
So because they were bodybuilders, I was making at-home protein bars. All their wives were making at-home protein bars. My husband comes from a morbidly obese family. And so when it becomes a mission where I think it was Mother Teresa that said, not everybody's going to fight for the masses, but everyone will fight for the one. So when you're on your mission, when you feel tired, when you fall on your knees and you don't feel like you're any good, who's that person you're going to think of that's going to help you get back up? And so for my husband, he wanted to think of his mum and his sister who were morbidly obese. Every day when he felt badly about himself, you know, if a product wasn't working or the production line wasn't working, he could ask himself, okay, you could lick your wounds or you can get up and help your mum. And so that became the start to Quest Nutrition. Now, at the time, they're like, look, we've got this idea. We have to exit our current company. But Lisa, you don't work. So can you help out? And so because I adopted the mindset that I was a good wife, quote unquote, I was like, of course, what do you need? Now, in that moment, put our house up for collateral.
Wow.
And so if Quest failed, we would have lost our house. And so every time I was faced with myself, now what I mean by that is when I can't do something or the voice in my head is telling me I'm no good, how do I act? in the past, I would back off because it felt emotionally damaging to move towards not feeling good about myself and doing something that made me fail. But the second I was faced with Quest, where it was like, either you do this or you lose your house. Like it was a very clear line where it's like, well, I don't want to lose my house, so I better figure this out. And every time you ask yourself, I better figure this out, you don't think about how many times it's going to take. You just keep going. And so that taught me over time that, Lisa, you may not know something now, but you have the ability to learn. And that ability to learn is what made me feel good about myself, not the fact that I had to be right. And that was a lesson that I learned very early on at Quest. And so I was just shipping bars from my living room floor. I just thought of myself as a good Greek wife, that I was just helping out my husband. And what we didn't realize is the company would grow at 57,000%. Now, what that actually means, is you go from $0 to $1 billion in 5 years.
Oh my goodness. That is incredible. That is really incredible. I mean, it's what entrepreneur dreams are made of, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we see is like the end result. But I'm sure it wasn't easy. And in your book, you talk about really rolling up your sleeves, getting in there, doing all kinds of work in the warehouse, playing your hip hop music and just really going for it. Would you share, either what's the one biggest challenge that you had to face going through that, or some of the big challenges you faced?
Yeah, it really was my own insecurities, because every time I would try something, the insecurity would come up. Who do you think you are, Lisa? You don't have the experience, right? I would walk into a board meeting with my husband and his 2 business partners, and they'd already been in business for 8 years. His business partners before that had already been in business for 10 years. So here I was sitting at the table where I had 0 experience, where I'd been a stay-at-home wife for 8 years. I was cooking, cleaning, and taking care of my puppies. And, and I really want to make sure actually that I emphasize here to anyone who's just coming across me for the first time, there is nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home wife. If that's what you want, I freaking applaud you. It's just I didn't want that. And I was in quiet desperation. And so when you're in quiet desperation, how do you get out? It's the imposter syndrome. It's the negative voice. That was my hardest thing. So walking into a boardroom when you're with seasoned entrepreneurs and you have no idea what you're talking about, it's very scary. And so for me, the lessons really were, Lisa, it doesn't matter who you are today. Who do you want to become and how do you get there? And so if I can adopt the identity, instead of the identity of being the person that's always right, or being the identity of being the person that always wants to do a good job, how do I adopt an identity that can serve me even when I fall, even when I fail? And then the idea was that you could have the identity of the learner. So now imagine I walk into a boardroom, I have like the anxiety of like, oh my God, do I speak up? Do I not? But then I just pivot and go, but Lisa, you've got the identity of the learner. And that just allowed me to go, oh my God, I want to soak in everything everyone's got to say. I don't feel intimidated anymore. I go in with a pen and a pad, right, and be like, okay, what can I learn today? And that allowed me to literally walk into any room, tackle any project, any circumstance or any situation with grace and with the ability to get better. And so even when I went from shipping bars from my living room floor one day to then I had a facility, I had 40 employees working underneath me within 2 years. So you can imagine, Jen, that it's just me, little old me, shipping from my living room floor. And then 2 years later, I've got 40 employees underneath me. And those employees, our first facility was in Compton. And again, with the idea that we don't care who you are today, all we care about is who do you want to become. We didn't care whether you had a criminal record. And that was something me and my husband just felt very strongly about. And so we just put the word out on the street, if you will. And so half of my crew were ex-convicts. They were like 6'5", big jack dudes with like tats all over them. And so it's very intimidating. I'm 5'1" for people that don't know, with a British accent. So, I understand human behavior. And human behavior, it says that people try and get away with anything if they can. Not to be mean-spirited or anything like that, but I realized very quickly that I had to command a room, not demand a room. And so how do I command a room? It means that I have to learn the skill set of talking to my team. And I didn't know what I was doing. So again, going back to kind of where I started, whereas I just have to keep learning, like, oh my God, I'm the person that can go into something and then not know something to then learn. I read all the books, right? I was reading Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. That was the book at the time that was really big. Loved the book, but it's corporate world. So I'm here trying to use her skills that she's teaching on a very different environment with different people in a different circumstance and situation. So I kept failing at being a great leader. And so that's when I just had to say, Lisa, what do you know? Like, go back to your heart. And I'm like, well, these guys like hip hop. I'm a freaking hip hop maniac. So what happens if I got some speakers and blasted Tupac on days where it was really busy? Instead of them getting stressed out, now I can have some fun with it. And that ended up working like magic. I would have these like competitions with them. I would have like, you know, offer them like free Quest protein bars if they beat me on certain situations, like if they could lift a certain amount of, you know, boxes, if they could package boxes quicker than I could. And in doing all of that, it made them realize that I was human. It made me very relatable, and it made me very comfortable around them, and they could sense that I wasn't trying to be someone that I wasn't. And so those were just a little like of those stories of where a situation happened where I could have failed. I could have let my insecurities take over. I could have run in the other direction. But every time I said to myself, Lisa, if you don't, you're going to lose your house. You better figure it out. It ended up teaching me an amazing lesson.
Amazing. So many good nuggets in there. Specifically, the distinction I want to point out is identity shifting. I studied NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, for those of you that don't know what it is, and performance coaching. And working with a client to help shift their identity is deep and advanced work, like really deep. And I feel like it almost came naturally to you to understand how to do that, to go from imposter syndrome to, you know what, I'm a lifelong learner as an identity shift is huge and could seriously like make the world of difference in people's lives.
It didn't come easily at all.
Okay.
Not at all. I just always think of a phrase. Does this serve you? Does this serve your goals? And every time I was scared, every time I had imposter syndrome, every time that I wanted to literally run in the other direction because I felt badly about myself, I just asked myself, does running the other direction serve you and your goals? Yes or no? And so now it's like, I do what moves me towards my goals. I don't do what doesn't move me towards my goals. And if you have a binary kind of rule for yourself like that, it may seem like it comes easily, but it doesn't. But it just allows you, one of my favorite movies is Karate Kid, right? It just allows you to like wax on, wax off, practice, practice, practice. And so that's how I think of everything. It's like, it may not come easily yet, but one day if you keep practicing, it will.
You guys, do you see why I love this woman so much? I mean, she just referenced the Karate Kid, waxing on, waxing off. I mean, let's just get into Cobra Kai soon enough, but you get it.
Yeah, buddy.
It's about life as a dojo, getting onto the mat. You're going to be hit with opponents of all different kinds. And most of those times, the opponent is yourself. It's the voice in your head. It's the imposter syndrome. And literally, Lisa's book, Radical Confidence, walks you through, how many lessons are 10 no BS lessons on how to be the hero of your own life, how to overcome imposter syndrome. Okay. So those were the kind of the early days. As time went on, now all of a sudden you're $1 billion company. How long did that take? You said about 5 years?
5 years.
So in that time, I know you said your biggest challenge was yourself and confidence, but you do share a lot about your health in the book. And I'm curious from, you know, again, from what I do, but also the people I work with and people listening, right? How do we balance self-care? How do we make sure that we keep our health a priority when we have these humongous goals? I mean, huge.
Yeah. Okay.
How do we do it?
Great. This is a great question, Jen. So if I was to say to you, okay, you have to drive from LA to New York, but you can't stop and put gas in your tank, and you can't refill your oil or your water. And I'm not a car person, so that's about as much as I know.
Me too.
Do you think that that's possible?
No.
That's exactly like a human body. So now once I had massive issues that literally got me to fall to my knees where I couldn't eat I was eating like 5 ingredients for over a year. I was 20 pounds lighter than I am now. My nails, my hair was falling out. Like it was bad. And that taught me a great lesson. And the lesson is that if you cannot serve yourself, you cannot serve anyone else or anything else, period. So even when I talk about balance, I actually don't like the word balance personally. I like the word harmony.
Yeah.
And the reason why I like the word harmony is because everyone's going to be different. I don't look for 50-50 self-care and work. But what I do think about is priorities. I think about, I can't show up for my business. I can't show up to impact people. I can't show up to serve, which is my mission specifically, if I don't take care of myself first. And so that means everything comes into priority. Now, when I talk about priorities, there's two different types of priorities. There's one, as in where does your energy go from an hourly standpoint? And then the other one is if they came into conflict, which one do you choose? So priorities for me on a day-to-day where my hours go is work. I work like 14 hours a day, roughly, 12 to 14.
Still today, yes.
Still today, yeah, because I'm so driven on my mission, which is a very big part of how I keep showing up. But my priority from an hour standpoint is work first. Then it's self-care. Then it's my relationship. But if I had to do a priority where everything came into conflict, it would be self-care first, relationship second, business third.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why I put my relationship second is even though it's like the most important thing in my life, at the end of the day, I can't show up in my relationship if I don't take care of my health.
You can't show up to anything without your health.
Yeah, exactly. And so it becomes a write things in order, write things down in order priority. And so now if self-care, especially because I had such detrimental health, I know what it looks like if you don't have your health.
Right.
I know what it looks like when you burn out. I know what it looks like when you feel terrible about yourself and your hormones are all over the place and you can't control your emotions. And that doesn't serve anyone, anything, especially your goals or your mission. So it then became very easy for me to just sit down and go, cool, where do my hours go? And then now, how do I structure my day? And the truth is, every morning I show up for myself first. So I work out. That's my thing. I just love working out. I find so much empowerment.
Your guns on your website, or I was like, ooh, I started doing bicep curls after I looked at your website yesterday.
Because I love working out. Now, I used to be, this is how I got my health into trouble. I used to be the person that worked out for looks. And that meant I was trying to eat, my nutrition wasn't on point. I was trying to eat as low fat as possible, as low calories as possible, as low carb as possible, all the lows. And then I was running on the treadmill trying to burn off the calories. Now,
so
I
common.
lift weights. Yeah, it's so common. It's because I understand. So I don't want to like blame or shame anyone at all. Like I get it. It just was the biggest part of the detriment to my health.
Yeah.
And
it
so
was how we were brainwashed when we were young, looking at the models in the magazines and do more cardio and eat low fat and eat low calories. I mean, it was literally pumped into our brains. So I understand where it comes from. It's just wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And now you have to, even like that's a belief system that maybe people have. And so even just saying it's wrong isn't going to shift people out of it. Like I sadly had to hit rock bottom myself in my health to go, oh yeah, this isn't the answer. And so what I did is I just made a promise to myself. And I promised myself that I would never use the looks in the mirror as a way to dictate what I ate and how I showed up every morning. And so because I couldn't eat properly for a long time, I couldn't run on a treadmill because my gut was protruded. Like it literally had protruded out. I couldn't wear a bra. I couldn't stand up for longer than 5 minutes at a time. And this went on for maybe a year. And I'm still struggling now 7 years later. So 7 years later, I still have to monitor my food. I still have to, in the sense of like, I can't have canola oil. I can't have soy. I can't have gluten. I've identified all the troublemakers in my life. I have to call restaurants ahead of time. I take supplements when I travel. Like I still have to be very conscious of it. So I know what it feels like to not feel good and then that knock-on effect. So I just say to myself, how do I show up? And so I stopped counting calories. I trashed the scale. I don't ever weigh myself anymore.
Good job.
And I don't, because I couldn't run on the treadmill, I just started lifting weights because that was the one thing I could do. And what I realized was it was such a healthy way for my brain, like to start my day. And so like having felt that and having really experienced it. So I just now structure my day according to self-care first. And so that means I wake up every morning, I go and I weight lift.
Love it.
And if I'm feeling stressed that morning though, I give myself permission to not work out. Like I just don't get obsessed with it. And so now because, 7 years, I still love lifting weights because I don't say to myself, I have to, or I should. Don't count the calories. I just make sure that everything I eat is very healthy from a organic standpoint because, berries and even coffee is like one of the highest things that carry pesticides. And I've done so many interviews with hormone doctors to understand how your hormones impact your confidence. And so anyone listening that thinks like, oh my God, that's just too much hassle. Like, here's what I want to ask you. What's your goal? If you want to feel good about yourself and you want to show up confident, homie, you got to pay attention to your hormones. Like, you just have to. Like, I wish it wasn't so. I really wish I could, Netflix and chill, eat ice cream every day and feel amazing. I just don't. And so if you're trying to listen to this podcast and get tips of how you can show up and do amazing work and really have the confidence, but you're not paying attention to your sleep, you're not paying attention to the movement of your body, you're not paying attention to your hormones, you're just missing a massive part of what can help you get successful in that area.
I don't even know where to start, because you're speaking my language, obviously, as a health coach and nutritionist. I started my career as a personal trainer and a martial artist. So strength training to me is one of the most favorite things that I do when I need a state change. So if I'm feeling anxious, if I'm feeling down, if I'm feeling stressed out, I literally have my 15-pound dumbbells near my desk, and I'll just start picking them up right in the middle of the day. I don't need to like take a break or go to a gym. They're just part of my life because it makes me feel so strong. And you're right. Everything we do affects our hormones. And I feel like everyone should have just like a 101 course on hormones and how we can kind of, I hate the word hacking hormones, but hack them in the sense of, you want to feel a boost of confidence? Yeah, lift a weight. If you want to feel a certain way, if you want to feel love, pet your dogs. There are ways that we can get the feelings that we want to feel in natural and healthy ways. The other distinction I just want to point out that you said also, I was flashed back when you started talking about priorities to being about 25 years old in a Tony Robbins conference. And that was one of the first things that I remember learning as he's like scribbling on the board with his huge hands, was priorities. And he would have people come up and share, what are your top priorities, right? From 1 to 10, if you had to list all the priorities, what you think your priorities were, right? And then when you actually map it out in the time, like you said, the time that you spend on your priorities, you will see a lot of times that you actually don't value the things that you say you value as highly, because you're putting all your time, your resources, your energy, your money into ones further down on your list, right?
Yeah.
And then he showed us all that, again, if we don't have health as he'll double down and say as our number one priority, then really you're just not showing up for anyone or anything else in your life in the most optimal way. Really, really powerful stuff. So prioritizing your health.
This is why we get along so well, Jen.
I know. I love it. Everything you're saying, I'm like biting my tongue. I'm like, yes. But honestly, I don't have a type A personality. Let's just call it that for whatever reason. I feel sometimes like I don't have what it takes, and I'm using air quotes if you can't see, to work all day long and 7 days a week. Like, I just don't have it in me. It's not part of my makeup. So sometimes I get down on myself. Like, I could be further along in my career if I just worked more, if I just took less time for myself, right? And I just have to come to acceptance with it that actually I'm filling my cup more than a lot of folks out there. And if I just take longer to get to the places I'm going to, that's okay. From New York, what is it? New York to LA, you said the car?
Yeah.
I'm just taking a detour or two. That's okay.
Yeah. And I love that, Jen, because that's so powerful, because here's the thing is that we compare ourselves to everybody else. Now, my husband, he works like 18 hours a day. Like, he's up at like 4 a.m. and he literally crawls into bed as he's taking out his AirPods where he's listening to a podcast that he's learning. And for a long time, I felt like I had to keep showing up just as much as he did. Now, the thing is that he can handle a lot more stress than I can. He can handle a lot more work than I can. And he loves his life when he's working that much. I won't. And so I think it's so important that we stop judging ourselves based on what other people do and say, what's our limit? What makes a happy life? And for me, and so even when I was releasing my book, it's interesting that you said that, because when I was releasing my book, all of my friends, not all of them, but I've got a lot of friends who have incredible #1 New York Times bestsellers. And so I just called them up and I basically was like, okay, what's it? And I asked them like a million questions, right? Because I'm a learner. I just love to learn. So I asked them like a million questions. And every single one, especially female, were like, I totally burnt out. I hated my life after I did my book, but I was New York Times #1. And I was doing this. Now, when I was on my book tour, I said to myself, I know myself. Lisa, if you go as hard as those women, your gut won't be able to handle it. I wish it could, right? To your point, I wish I could work that. I wish my gut could handle it, but I know it wouldn't. And so I asked myself before I even started, Lisa, what are the amount of hours you can put in that is sustainable for you to be able to crush it on your book tour and not feel like you're going to crash? And so I came up with a whole plan, and part of my self-care is every Saturday morning I draw. So I have a pencil, I have a pad, and I have like my art desk, and I switch off my phone. I don't let anyone disturb my personal time. Now, as I was approaching my book tour, I was like, oh God, well, this feels a bit like, should I really be doing artwork when I could be working? Like, Lisa, this is your first book, right? Like, the stakes are high. I've got to represent the family, right? I've got to represent the company. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself. It had nothing to do with my husband.
Right.
And then I just asked myself, what happens if you stop doing the self-care?
Friends, if you've been following even for a short amount of time, you know it is my mission in life to help women feel more strong, safe, and powerful from the streets to the boardroom. One of my very favorite products to help you, your daughters, your nieces, and even your aging relatives stay more safe is Invisiwear jewelry. How it works is each product, from bracelets to keychains to necklaces and even scrunchies, all contain an SOS built-in button that connects to an app on your cell phone. From there, if you ever feel in danger, you just hit the button twice, and it will send an SOS text with a link to your location to your pre-selected emergency contacts. For a premium subscription, which is optional, for just $11.99 a month, you can then text or speak to an ADT security agent 24/7 on call to help you get the help you need exactly when you need it. So head to invisiwear.com, use code SHEWARRIOR, one word, for 10% off your purchase, and stay safe, my friends.
And I just projected forward, and I'm like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And I said, I put in all these self-care moments in order for me to be able to show up. If I don't do these things, I know what happens to my health. So I had to convince myself and do a whole thought process of making sure that I kept my self-care time on Saturday mornings, that I still drew. So even though like my editor's pinging me, my marketing team, right, everybody's like, we need this, we need that. And I said, nope, I'm taking the 3-4 hours and I'm going to draw. And that becomes where you have to like project forward and just say, what happens if I keep doing this? And then feel okay with your own limits and know that you're still showing up.
Right. Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't realize it until they're already in burnout mode. And then, and sadly, sometimes, it's really, really bad, like autoimmune diseases and stuff that you can't just turn around really quickly. It takes sometimes years, and sometimes it never goes away. You have to manage it for the rest of your life. So is it worth it, people? When will you make health your number one priority? Just muse on that for a second. Okay. The next subject I want to talk about, well, it's kind of related to that, because in your book, when you talk about your gut issues, you talk about personal responsibility. You say, if I created it, then I can fix it. And I thought, that is one of the most powerful things that I think a lot of people don't want to do out there, right? We don't want to take personal responsibility for everything in our lives, because then we really have to do something about it. So can you share more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can be triggering for people, for like, I think of it as everything is my fault. Like as an idea, just an all encompassing umbrella. Everything's your fault, Lisa. The word fault though does trigger people, because I totally understand it may bring on shame. It may bring on blame. Now, so I want to caveat by saying I use language that propels me towards my goals. I don't use language that doesn't propel me towards my goals. And so the word fault triggers me just enough for me to go, well, you don't want it to be your fault, Lisa, so you better get started, right? So it spurs me into action. Now, if anyone's listening at home and the word fault is actually triggering and it makes them feel blame or shame, don't use it. Use the word ownership, responsibility, accountability. Use whatever word that is going to propel you forward. But what I realized was, Jen, I was so that person that was like, I felt so insecure. The last thing I wanted was to take on ownership over the things that were happening around me. That just made me feel worse about myself. And in the whole health health journey, I was going to every doctor I could and be like, fix me, because I had no idea what was going on. I just couldn't eat and I couldn't stand up and my stomach was protruded. So you can imagine I was just like, I don't know what's happening. Please fix me. And so over time, everything I was trying wasn't working. And there was one day where I had the worst gut issues. And I talk about this in the book, but I had the worst gut issues.
The bathroom floor one?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I was at a photo shoot and I was, again, remember, I can't stand up for longer than 5 minutes at a time. I've got a photo shoot. I was the type of person at the time that would never tell people I have gut issues. Like the shame of saying I, own a protein bar company and I can't even eat our own products or anything. Like it felt too shameful. So I didn't tell anybody. So on this photo shoot, and I got the worst stomach cramps ever. And I was like, almost hard for me to take a breath. And so I was just like, I'm so sorry guys, just excuse me, I'll be back. I didn't tell them where I was going. I run upstairs because the shoot was in my house. I run upstairs and I fall to the bathroom. I fall on the floor, just clutching my stomach, trying to take my breaths. And I have a rule with my husband is that you can call each other once, we can ignore each other. We can call each other twice, we can ignore each other. But if we call each other on that third time, doesn't matter what you're doing, if you're interviewing Oprah Winfrey herself, you've got to say, sorry, I got to go. My wife's calling me or my husband's calling me. So we have this rule. So I'm on the floor. I've got my phone and I'm like, okay, I just have to call him 3 times. So I call him once, doesn't answer. Call him twice, doesn't answer. Call him on the third time. He doesn't answer.
Uh-oh.
And so now I'm on the floor going, I need my husband. I need my husband. I need my husband. And then I just pause. Now he's not coming to rescue me. And in that moment, I realized, Lisa, you are the hero of your own life. You don't need him. You want him, but you're your own hero. Get the F up and show yourself what you're made of. Now, in that moment, I stood up, I took deep breaths and I went and finished the photo shoot.
Wow.
That taught me so many lessons. The lesson was stop giving your power away to other people. And that's what I was doing with doctors. I was going to every doctor wanting them to fix me. Instead of me going, Lisa, when a doctor tells you to do this, if it doesn't feel right, start listening to your own body. Stop ignoring it. When a doctor, I went to a nutritionist and they're like, just eat raw vegetables. I was like, right now, the only food I can actually eat is fatty beef. It was like the only thing that I could stomach. And I was like, raw vegetables. I was like, okay, I guess they know better. As if a doctor knows better about your body than you do, especially when it's got signals. So I started to realize, instead of blindly listening to the quote unquote experts, start listening to yourself. Take accountability that your body's trying to tell you something and you're ignoring it. Now, over time, what I started to realize was where my health issues really started. I grew up with a mom that was borderline anorexic. I very much held my self-esteem to being as skinny as possible. I stopped eating fat. We said earlier, right? Stopped eating fat, stopped eating carbs, was running on the treadmill, and I was getting sick a lot because what I didn't realize is 70% of your immune system is carried in your gut. So I was getting sick a lot, going to the doctors. He was giving me antibiotics. And after about the 3rd round or the 4th round in a year of antibiotics, the doctor turned around to me and said, I probably shouldn't give you this many antibiotics. Now, up until that point, I was blaming the doctors. The doctors gave me antibiotics and, that's why. No, not at any point did I say, hang on, Lisa, you had an unhealthy relationship with food. That's on you. Number 2, when the doctor said I probably shouldn't give you any antibiotics, did I ask why? Did I go do my own research? Did the doctor force the antibiotics down my throat? No, I had every ounce of control over whether I took them or not. And every ounce of control to ask the questions and to take the responsibility to do my own research. And so once that epiphany happened of don't listen to everyone else, like actually take the responsibility on, it started down a path of me asking questions, of me doing my own research, of me listening to my own body. And in that path is how I actually ended up healing my body. Now, look, again, I couldn't do it alone. I went to a lot of different doctors. I had a lot of different tests done. So I don't want to make out like I was a guru and did it all myself. But it all started with me taking that accountability part for me to just give myself the grace that I had done that to myself, because I stopped beating myself up. Once I took accountability, it was weird, Jen, how I then didn't beat myself up anymore. I was like, oh, you didn't know any better, Lisa. You did everything you could with the information you had, but now you know better.
Yeah.
And so take the accountability, take the responsibility, own the decisions that I made, and now own the decisions I make from here on out. And I now use that idea with every single thing that I do, whether it's diet, nutrition, my business, my relationship, everything. I don't blame my husband. I look at myself and say, what's my part in this? Now, again, that's not to say that other people don't have accountability too, but I can't control other people. I can only control myself and how I show up.
It's honestly life altering when you can look at life through that lens. So I think it's really important. I try to weave it into my safety trainings. And again, it could be very triggering, especially people who have been victims of other things. Now, again, that's a kind of different topic, but in daily interactions, in most parts of your life, if you can look at it like, okay, I am responsible for things in my life, the way my life is right now, I'm responsible. I got myself here. Then yes, you have the power to change it. If you aren't happy, you have the power to change your wealth, your health, your body, your life, your relationships. So thank you for bringing that up. I used to read about that a lot, and I just think it's a really important topic.
I absolutely not saying it to anyone who has had, any type of physical abuse, especially as children. Like there's a massive, I'm talking about as an adult, the decisions that I make versus the things that have happened to me, of course. So thank you for saying that, because that is really important to just emphasize.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just want to make sure everyone listening gets it too, right? That's what we're talking about. Another topic that I actually was really excited that you had a whole chapter about, because I was going to ask you about it anyway, but on your Instagram lately, I noticed you posting a lot of content on child-free living. And as a child-free woman myself, I just want to thank you and acknowledge you for doing that, because it's not very often that we see that that we see it celebrated anyway. So I appreciate that. Also, can you just tell us how you got there? Because I have a very complicated story that I haven't really shared yet and probably won't now, but coming from your Greek family and the cultural and societal expectations of you becoming a mother, how did you change that? How did you break free from that? How did you make that choice?
Yeah, thank you. It was really hard for me to talk about at first, because I still get judged now. I still get hate messages that are just like, one day your husband's going to realize he wants kids and he's going to leave you. I mean, it's bad, girl. It's bad. Because I'm so secure now in my decision. It pisses me off, but it doesn't upset me, if that makes sense. Like, it's like, it pisses me off that people are cruel. It's just humanity is like that. But then it doesn't upset me. I don't take it personally. So
I just pretend they're like bots. They're not even people, that say that stuff, because I get them too.
Yeah.
So
I kind of think of them as like, what is their wound that causes them to take the time, that I've triggered them enough for them to be so defensive, but in a hateful way. So I'd like almost have a bit of empathy while I sit and still, pissed off. I think it came back down to questioning your belief system. So we were growing Quest. I had finally found myself. I absolutely loved what I was doing. I thought I was going to have 4 kids, but I was just absolutely loving what I was doing. And I kept putting off, oh no, I'm just going to have kids next year. We're just going to try in 2 years. Like, it kept, like, the timeline kept shifting. Until eventually I was like, I actually need to assess this, because me and my husband are pushing it off. And I just need to now just go deep and start asking myself some questions. And the questions really began is like, okay, do you want kids? Well, yes. Why do you want kids? Because of legacy and because it will make my mom happy, right? Like, just asking yourself the real questions allowed me to really unveil all the things that I wasn't actually saying out loud. And when I then even said, well, it's legacy. And it's like, okay, but what does legacy mean to you? Okay, well, legacy actually means to me is being remembered when you're gone. Okay, well, do you need your own child to have that? Well, no, actually, I guess I don't need to have my own child to do that. Okay, so why else would you like to have kids? Well, people say that, you're going to be glad when you're older because there's someone to take care of you. Okay. Is it worth, Lisa, you giving up on your dream right now and sacrificing and having a life that actually doesn't excite you for something in the future that you may want? Okay, no, right? And I just I just went down that rabbit hole of asking myself a series of questions that then unveiled my answers. And then once I'd realized, I don't think I want children, I didn't tell anyone for like a year. I mean, obviously me and my husband discussed it, but I didn't tell anyone for a year because I was so worried about what people would say. And I knew that my mom was so excited to be a grandmother. And my mom is like one of my favorite people on the planet. So there was all these things that were stopping me. And I was like, okay, well, I have to tell my mom I can't live my life with my mom, because if life takes its course the way it should, our parents are going to go before us. Yeah. So when I know that, to live a life for my parents just didn't make sense to me.
Right.
And so to have a child just for my mom, knowing very well the heartbreak that will come when she leaves this earth, I just realized, okay, so I can't do it for that reason. And so I started to just tell one person, then tell another person, and then just tell my mom. And my mom still didn't really believe it. Like, she just kept asking even after that. And so just being very aware of not being bullish and not being dismissive of other people's feelings as well, and just being very respectful, but standing my ground, became something that, again, wax on, wax off. You get better at defending. And then I realized, hang on, why do I even defend it? Like, I don't need to defend it. And then I realized the most enlightening thing is, it's interesting how if you went up to a woman with a baby and said, why do you have a child? People would be horrified that you asked that question.
Right.
And so it's like, that just made me laugh, right? It's like, oh, it's so double standards that you would never ask a woman why she has kids, but with a horrid look on your face, right? But people can do that the other way around. And then again, I just then realized it's a belief system. Other people have a belief system. And maybe if you say that you don't want children, and maybe people didn't realize they had a choice, right? Maybe there's other women out there that never questioned it. And now, so there's a whole load of emotions that I understand can come with saying that you're deciding not to have children. But the key is to be strong and firm in your position. And then the last piece of this is what I realized was, more and more people like you as well, Jen, are coming out saying, I don't want children, or I've decided to as well. And the message is now flipping a little, where now women who are deciding to have children are feeling badly. Same with business. Women who are deciding to stay at home instead of starting their own business, and now feeling triggered and judged by women who are going into the workspace. And so I'm trying to be a voice where I'm like, homies, we've just got to stop all the judgment. Yeah. Like, we've just got to stop, because the key is, what life do you freaking want, and are you living it? Period. I don't care if you want a whole school of children. Go ham. I got your back. Right. But let's just stop the judging. That one means something about you. One gives judgment. One's good. One's bad. That we just got to cut that. Okay. We just got to cut that shit out. Yeah. And now if we as women can support each other, no matter what you decide, then we could you imagine that type of life and that kind of world that we would be in?
I'm getting chills just thinking about it. I want everyone to support each other for the choices that you make and be happy with those choices, right? So this is bringing me back. I'm getting these flashbacks of being in a taxi from LAX to my home, which is about 15, 20 minutes, with this driver who lectured me the entire time about being a married woman with no children. And what's the point of getting married, he said, and blah, blah, blah. And, it's like you go back in time and wish you should have said something. I wish I would have gotten out of the car. What I did, I made the decision that I'll never take a taxi again. I will only Uber, so I can give people bad ratings if they berate me like that. Like, 0 stars, buddy. Shut up. But I just my mind was blown, I think. And I was in that freeze mode of is this even happening right now? Why is this man judging me for not having children? And I realized that, yes, we do that to each other. Women do it to each other all the time. So again, thank you for celebrating everyone's choices.
Yeah, of course. And it's funny how you say taxi. I was actually in an Uber once, and the woman was actually asking me questions, and she was like this little Hispanic lady. And she was asking me questions about my marriage and how long I've been married. And I was like, at the time, I think I'd been married for maybe 18 years or something. And I'm just celebrating my 21st wedding anniversary. Aww. But yeah, it was around the 18-year mark. She goes, oh, do you have any kids? And I was like, no. Before I could say anything else, she starts going, it's okay. Don't worry. Not all of us were meant to have children. Maybe you can be an amazing aunt. And as she starts talking, I realized she just automatically assumed I couldn't have children. Right. Like, she just automatically assumed that. And so even in that moment, I was like, well, bless her. Like, that's just her belief system, because she came from a world where she was taught that, of course, women have kids. So if you've been married that long, it's definitely not because you don't want children. Right. And so even with that, the 0 Uber rating and stuff makes me laugh, because I do, I've actually even let that go. Like it used to get me upset. Like I said, I don't get upset anymore because people don't necessarily mean to, except unless you're trying to be actually cruel. People don't realize they're placing judgment on you.
Right.
And I think that in a world where people are very quick to come at each other for different people's opinions and thoughts and beliefs, I've now gone like, yeah, that's their belief. Fine, go with it. And if you can make peace with it, Jen, like really make peace with that decision, where when another guy says like, oh my God, I can't believe, that you can almost laugh at it. Like that's where I'm trying to get to, where I can sincerely laugh about it. I'm not there yet, even now. Like that cruel comment, I still screenshot it and send it to my husband, and he's like, hey, he's like, really? And I'm like, I know, like this asshole, right? Like,
right. And they'd never say it to him. They'd never say it to him.
No, never. You're right. Never. But again, I didn't let it upset me. And that was where it did used to. Like, it was like, well, am I a bad woman? Does that make me not nurturing? Babe, am I not nurturing? Right? It would start to make me question myself. But I do think that stuff like that, sometimes it just takes time. And then giving yourself the grace that you have to go through that process. It's like, let's say 10 steps, where it's like you first whisper it to yourself, then you first admit it to yourself, then you have the discussion with your partner, then you say it to one person, then you say it to 10 people, then you say it to a stranger, right? And so it just becomes these stepping stones of waxing on, waxing off, that you then become a black belt and being able to tell people that you don't have children or you don't want children, and it just like slide off your back and you forget it the next day.
Yes, I love it. And I'm on the journey, and I'm almost there too. I have a birthday coming up. I'm turning 47 in October. So I also have this feeling of like getting past the point where it's like, hey, it's not even physically possible anymore. And to me, that feels a relief. It feels like this relief of getting to the other side and saying, yes, this is the life I've created, and I'm grateful for it, not in a toxic way. Like I truly am grateful for my life, and having the freedom to really follow my dream life. So wherever you are on that journey, people out there listening, wherever you are, it is okay. Wherever you are, you will find people that will model the choices that you want to make. Follow them, reach out to them, engage with them. For me, Lisa has just been one of those people. So thank you. And with that, coming to a close, full circle is exactly what you were saying. The last kind of note that I made that I wanted to talk about was this principle of mastering your emotions. For me, I think that is the biggest work in progress in life, and one of the biggest keys to having a successful life, and whatever you deem successful for your life, but mastering your emotions along the way, because obviously we're going to get on the mat. We're going to get knocked down. Life is going to throw us curveballs. We're going to wax on, wax off, block all the punches and kicks. But at the end of the day, right, it's our emotions that are kind of running us through all this. So can you just talk a little bit more about mastering your emotions?
Yeah, I love this, because out in the world of social media, a lot of people are saying, you know, like, feel your feelings, don't ignore them. You know, you should be able to be open and honest about your feelings. And it's like, yes, I agree with it partly, because here's the things, your emotions are not always right. Think about hormones. In fact, here's the situation, Jen. You don't eat. Right. What happens? You get hangry.
Yeah.
Right? So you now act in a way that isn't actually in accordance with who you really are, because you don't eat. Now imagine you factor in your hormones, you factor in tiredness, you don't sleep, you've had stress. All of those things are going to impact the way that you show up every day. Right. And in my book, I talk about it almost like as if likened to alcohol. If you've had one shot of vodka, let's say, so you may get a little giggly. You have 2 shots, you have 3 shots, you have 4 shots. By like the 6th shot, maybe you're dancing on a table, maybe you're kissing the bouncer on the way out, right?
I'd be like on the floor, but yeah.
Okay, you're on the floor, right? But you're going to act in a way, or you may even say something that you regret, right? So now think about that. The next day, what happens? You regret it. You're like, oh my God, I was so embarrassed. I can't believe that I danced on the table. I can't believe that I did this. All because you've had too much alcohol. Now imagine emotions to be that exact same way. If you have one little thing where maybe you haven't eaten, okay, maybe. Now imagine you don't eat and you don't sleep. Now imagine you don't eat, you don't sleep, and your hormones are out of whack. It becomes a stacking effect that you're going to have an emotional response to something that maybe in your calm moments you're going to regret. The next day, you're going to regret it. Once you've walked away, once the heat has, died down, you're going to potentially regret the things that you said. So if you can just accept that we are human and that is the case, now you don't beat yourself up over it. But now you have to have an action plan to make sure that your emotions do not steer you.
Right.
And so how do you come up with that action plan? My tip is that I kind of go back in time. I go back to a moment where I wasn't proud of myself. And I said, okay, if this was a script, write it out like a script, Lisa. They said this, you said this, right? Just do it as a script, because in a book, you can write the internal dialogue. As a script, you can't. So now you're writing it as a script. They said this, then this is how you responded. Then go in with like a red marker or whatever and say how you felt along that way. When they said this, I actually started to get flustered. Okay, flustered is one of your signals. Okay, when they kept going, I started to get agitated. And because I'm agitated, I get fidgety. Okay, great. Fidgety is a signal. And now what you do is you start to decipher how you act, what those stepping stones are for you. And now you rewrite that script. So you say, when I start getting flustered, what do I do instead? When I start getting agitated, what do I do instead? And now what that does is allows you to notice when you're having an emotional moment, to then have a game plan when you have an emotional moment, so that you then don't get too tipsy emotionally, that you then end up regretting it. So that's kind of like a very simple way that I think about emotions. And then I go back to what we actually full circle, what we said earlier is, does your emotions, having an emotional response, serve your goals? Yes or no? And I don't think I've ever had a moment where my emotional turmoil has actually helped serve me or a goal. It's always when I'm emotionally sober, I like to call it.
Yeah.
I've always been able to think clearly, speak in an articulate way, put my point across very respectfully. And so those moments have been the thing I then lean into. And once you start wax on, wax off, you get better and better. And so I don't think you're ever going to be perfect. At least I've never strived for perfection. I've strived for progress, which means that once upon a time, I used to fly off the handle and have an emotional response. And, it would take 2 days for me to realize. And okay, well now I can pretty much feel my emotions as they're arising. And I can probably most of the time within 5 minutes course correct.
Right. Wow.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I'm not there all the time.
Yeah.
But I just say I went from the person that took 2 days to now the person that can maybe course correct in 5 minutes. And that's been 10 years of waxing on and off. So anyone listening at home right now, it becomes a rinse and repeat. It's you practice everything that I just said, do the script, and then rinse and repeat, try that, adapt, try it, adapt some more, try it, adapt some more. And now you can just be proud. Oh my God, once upon a time, it took me 2 days and now it only takes me 1 day, right? Like that's amazing. And I think that when people say like, you have to go from 0 to 100 or 100 to 0, it's so difficult that people then give up. But now I just urge people to be proud of the progress. And I've just noticed it, especially in business as well. And in my relationship, to be honest, when I'm trying to say to my husband something that has made me unhappy, if I come in emotional, he treats me like emotional. He's trying to be like, are you okay? But it doesn't resolve the problem. And so if I can come in unemotional and be like, hey, when you did this, it upset me. This is why it upset me. This is what you triggered in me. This is the word you used, right? And if you don't mind, can you please not do that? Can you please use this word instead? Now you can actually have a communication and a conversation that then you can improve together, versus you come in, you cry, you scream, and no, nothing gets resolved because they're just trying to get you back to emotionally sober again.
Right. Emotional sobriety. I love that. That's the term you use. And last but not least, you have 4 words on a Post-it note when you are in the thick of it, which, we've heard a lot of times, which is this too shall pass. What I loved most was in the rough times, in the bad and sad and anxiety and stressful times, we can look at that and say this too shall pass. But also, even in the good and happy times, we have to remember that this too shall pass, because as you point out, right, life is not going to be all rainbows and puppies all the time. So we can't expect that life will be all happy all the time.
Yeah, I think people, including myself, and this is kind of how I came up with it, is I would go on vacation or I'd have this amazing romantic dinner with my husband. And the second it wasn't like exactly that, or he was a little stressed, I'd be like, oh my God, is there something wrong? Like, and I would just get in my own head. And I was like, hang on a minute. What do I tell myself in the dark moments, this too shall pass, to get myself out of it? But in the happy moments, I think that should be the base. Like I realized that in me saying the amazing moments became the base was setting me up for disaster.
Right.
Because I was almost using that as if I wasn't always there, then my life wasn't going according to plan. And I think that the way the world is and the way the world works is that the joy is in the ebb and the flow. It's the bad times that allow you to really enjoy the good times. And it's the good times, the peak of the good times that can say, oh, let me enjoy this right now, because I know that in 2 weeks, this is not going to be like this. And if you don't have an expectation of that, you can actually enjoy it for what it is and be like, oh my God, this is one of those moments that we're never going to get back. Let's make sure we enjoy it. Because again, it's seeking perfection all the time, seeking the most amazing moments, thinking that your life is always going to be rainbows and sunshine. When it starts to rain, it's going to really make you think the complete opposite, versus going, oh, okay, the world needs sunshine and rain to evolve, right? Plants, humans, we all need water and sun.
Absolutely. So this too shall pass. Put it on a Post-it, put it on your desk, on your refrigerator, wherever you'll see it. Lisa, I have to remember this too shall pass, because I'm on a high right now from having you on this podcast and sharing so much wisdom with us. I have 4 rapid fire questions, if you would be obliged to answer.
Let's do it.
Yep. Number 1 is, what was your favorite food as a child?
Weetabix.
Oh yeah, I know that. Okay. Oh, I don't like that. 2, who would you like to have a drink with? The person could be dead or alive, and what would that drink be?
Oh, that's such a tricky one. I'm going to just go with someone alive, because I'm sure there's so many people dead that I would love to meet, like Margaret Thatcher. Like, talk about, God, a woman who had to sustain so much. But I'm just going to go with alive. Personally, this is just who I would die happy meeting. I'm going to go with Jodie Foster.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Any short reason why?
Yeah, I wrote my dissertation. So I went to film school. I wrote my dissertation and it was on women in film. And I just dove into her world. And she was really a big catalyst for women in film to pivot from being an actress to a director to a producer. And so because I wrote my dissertation on her, I just so admire her. Now, of course, that was really hard, because I do think also Oprah is just a freaking,
I know. But everyone's going to say her.
I know, exactly. So I was like, let me go with someone that you don't expect me to say.
Exactly. So Jodie Foster, and what drink would you have?
With her? Ooh, probably, I don't really drink much.
Could
so
be a
coffee.
Yeah. Great.
Like, I'd love to go for coffee with Jodie Foster. That feels like an epic day.
Love it. Awesome. Favorite self-help personal growth book?
Oh, Captivate by Vanessa Van Edwards.
Okay, I got to put that on my list. And last
but not
least,
amazing. She's amazing, amazing, amazing. Sorry.
Okay,
go ahead.
I'm going to look her up as soon as we hang up. And what's your favorite hype song? The song that gets you through the hard times?
Oh, currently or just like universally?
Universally.
Because I'm such a music fan, that's why I was like, I can't just say one. Jen, come on. It's like choosing a favorite child, people say. I would say it has to be Destiny Child, Survivor.
You put that in your book, so I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, there you go.
I love it. Oh my God, thank you so much, Lisa. Can you tell everyone where they can find all of your wisdom?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jen. You're amazing. I freaking adore you, homie. If you want to follow me on just like my day-to-day journey, you can go over to Instagram at Lisa Bilyeu, or I do amazing interviews. Jen, you were on my show. So that's Women of Impact, Lisa Bilyeu on YouTube. And then you can just find me all around social. And then my book, Radical Confidence, in any bookstores or on Audible. I read it myself, which I very much liked doing. I found it a lot of fun because even in that, my publisher was saying to me, well, you have to read it in a certain way. And I was like, look, I'm going to read it like me. I'm going to like laugh. I'm going to scream. I'm going to do the whole, like the frickins. And I was like, I just have to be me. So if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, then just go grab my book on audio.
Yes. And I highly, highly recommend that you do that. Like I said, it's like having a warm cup of tea with your homie. So thank you, Lisa. Everyone out there, I hope you share this with someone that could really use a boost of badassery right now in their life. Make sure that you hit follow and leave us a review if you feel called to. Thank you all. Bye.
Later.